Welcome into the ESPN FC studios for this Wednesday edition of the show. What a crew we have assembled. Brian McBride, Shaka Hislop, and a well-rested, back from vacation, Craig Burley. How was it?
I was working.
You were working? Not the whole
Wembley?
time.
So you dancing with a bee at one point.
You call that working?
Listen, I was there for 12 of the days I was there. 2 of those days were work.
So you were working.
It wasn't all vacation.
Speaking of those who are working abroad, we've got our crew in Madrid right now. Stuart Robson is with us, standing guard outside.
Well, he was at Wembley as well.
Yes, he was.
He also looks well rested.
Are out there in Madrid as well. We'll get their thoughts in a moment. But time to talk about the Europa League final. Why? What a performance from Chelsea. 4-1 the final score. Eden Hazard with a brace. Craig, I'll start with you. Was this Chelsea being great or just a total embarrassment for Arsenal?
No, it was a good performance from Chelsea, particularly after, say, maybe the half-hour marker after half-time. But you got to context it with Arsenal, who were really poor in the second half, and who are really a poor side, if we're being honest. You look at their away form this year is weak. It's why they didn't get in the top 4 in Champions League football when they were in a good position to do so. But Chelsea had the players that took advantage. They got better players. Their bigger players turn up on bigger occasions, i.e. you measure Ozil against Hazard, that kind of thing. And then defensively, I don't think either team have been great this year defensively, but I think out of 2 poor defences, Chelsea's certainly better than Arsenal's. That was awful in that second half.
Shaka, what did you see today?
Well, I thought Chelsea quite clearly had the better players. But at the same time, Chelsea were a team with not a whole lot to play for in terms of reward, other than the silverware, Europa League silverware. Arsenal's season was resting on this 90 minutes. After everything they'd done in the build-up against Valencia and against Napoli, they had 4th place finish in their own hands and somehow managed to take 7 points from their last 7 league games and find themselves outside the top 4 looking in, and had it all to prove. And if any team were to be motivated for this game, you'd fear it was Arsenal. Yet still, the first 45, I thought they played very well in the first 45 minutes, but couldn't get a goal. And then after that, once Olivier Giroud grabs a goal, it was what we've seen of Arsenal of the closing weeks of the season. A team that lacked any real fight, lacked any real spine, and in the end, it was an embarrassment at the hands of Chelsea, who came into this with all sorts of problems off the field. And yet still, they walk away quite simply with a whole lot more to celebrate and leaving you scratching your heads with this Arsenal team.
Lacazette, Aubameyang, Ozil, all in the starting lineup. And yet outside of that kind of one moment of brilliance from Alex Iwobi, Arsenal toothless in the second half. What happened?
Yeah, second half you could see they were all over the place. I think, Chelsea was able to find an outball. They were able to relieve pressure. And Arsenal weren't able to actually defend against that. To me, this was more about when you talk about their front 3. Ozil, pretty much anonymous throughout, I thought. But in the beginning, in the first 20 minutes, Arsenal did a good job of moving Chelsea around and actually catching Azpilicueta in too far. So that left side opened up for him. There was plenty of opportunities. One was a through ball. One possibly was a penalty. They just didn't take advantage of it. And if you switch it, you give Chelsea a little time to fix that at halftime. They come out. They play a much better attacking game, but defended extremely well. Christensen had an excellent game coming in and replacing Rudiger, not having played quite a bit. They didn't seem out of sorts like Arsenal did.
Arsenal?
Look,
worth a hammer.
Look, I know we'll get to Chelsea, but in some ways, and I know Rob was waiting patiently, in some ways this is a papering over the cracks, smokescreen appearance at a big European, okay, it's not the Champions League, but a big European final. And we know Chelsea have their own issues with transfer bans and managers and players possibly leaving. But let's just look at Arsenal here, who at the moment, and have been for a while, are on the road to nowhere, right? As an ownership, as a structure, as signing policy, as current players, as a squad, it's a club that has got to a European final, and I'll credit them for that. It doesn't say much for some of the teams that they beat, like Valencia and Napoli, by the way. But they got to the cup final, and how the hell they got there, I don't know. Because it's a club that, if it finishes 4th or 5th in the Premier League over the next few years, then that's going to be good enough, I think, because it hasn't got the players. The manager can't go without any criticism, but it really goes a lot deeper than that. And it's been rotting away since the overstay of Arsene Wenger, since the ownership of Stan Kroenke, and since the signing policies of people with, short-term views. And really and truly, if I was an Arsenal fan, I would be extremely worried about my competitiveness domestically, in particular, in the next 5 years in their current format.
Let's bring in Stuart Robson. Robbo, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe on yesterday's show you said that this would very much come down to Unai Emery's approach. Did he get it wrong, or did his players let him down tonight?
I thought he started the game quite well. I thought he got his tactics right. His system was better than Chelsea's system. And Brian mentioned it. The two centre-forwards for Arsenal occupied the four defenders for Chelsea. Azpilicueta was too narrow. Emerson was too narrow at times, and it allowed Kolasinac the freedom of the park in that first half. He didn't make the most of it. And then Chelsea, having scored the first goal, then had better quality players. They had better movement in the front areas. Giroud, I thought, was really poor in the first half. Suddenly scores a goal. His movement was better. Hazard then links up with him. Kovacic looked a better player. Jorginho started to run the game, which you expect him to do when Ozil was not really defending against him. So I think Chelsea played well in the second half, but it summed up Arsenal's season when they capitulated and they made the wrong decisions defensively once they went one goal down. Their spirit went away from them. Torreira crying at the end of the game when he was taken off. That's not a player that you want to be making sure you're disciplined and alert and making sure you get back in the game. He's crying when being taken off, and they've lost the final. It wasn't good enough from Arsenal in the second half, although they started well.
Maybe you're taking your star player off in a major cup final, for no matter the score, your attacking player for youngsters is an admission of where you think you are as a club and as a squad and where he thinks he needs to go. Now, he's not going to get backed. They won't back Unai Emery. They'll give him a few quid, but not anything to compete with the big boys. They'll give him a token gesture, and it's not all it's not all his. Of course, it's not all his fault. He said what is it? 2 transfer windows, one in January. Not that anybody really buys players. However, we sat here for and people will be out there saying, well, this has been no different than when Arsene Wenger was here. Well, yeah, I understand that, but is that where you level yourself at?
Right.
Because the fact that Arsene Wenger was there for so long and there was no structure put in place as everybody else was on the front foot means that they're already starting from a poor position. And, OK, I'm not judging it just on tonight. They were in a position in the Premier League to go and get Champions League football on their own, and they could hardly win a game away from home when the chips were down. They're a weak squad, they're a poor squad, and defensively, they're a nightmare.
I think the challenge for Unai Emery here is Mesut Ozil yet again, and I'm sure we'll talk about him as far as Arsenal is concerned until something happens, if not all summer long. What Arsenal do in the transfer window is going to be dictated by Mesut Ozil, whether he's there or not. My opinion, I've said this quite some time, they just have to take the hit on Mesut Ozil, because anybody coming in is going to be asking for Mesut Ozil money. I don't think you can afford that. Whether you're Arsenal, whether you own Stan Kroenke or anybody else, you cannot afford everybody coming through the door to be asking for that kind of money. And at the same time, I was surprised to see him in the starting 11 for Unai Emery today, because I just don't feel he offers an awful lot when the chips are down. Great in the first half, well, as good in the first half as you can expect when things are going your way, but from the time your back's up against it, again, Mesut Ozil goes missing.
Tell me something. I didn't think Aubameyang was... that front two didn't really work tonight. I think Lacazette's been better than Aubameyang. But those two apart when they're on form, what other Arsenal player, and I include Ozil, what other Arsenal player are the top clubs going to come in and cherry-pick?
Is elite.
What other players, Arsenal players, are the top clubs going to come in and say, I'll give you X amount for him?
Let's ask Robbo. Robbo, is there a player that fits that description currently on the Arsenal roster?
No, there was talk of Monreal at one point going to Barcelona, but he's not quite good enough. He played as the third centre-half, was taken off. You look at the centre-halves, they're not good enough. Socrates used to be a good player, but he's not quite so good these days. Iwobi's a young player that's got potential, but if you ask Arsenal fans about his performances over the season, they say they haven't been good enough. Maitland-Niles could be a decent player, but Craig's absolutely right. The big clubs aren't going to come in for any of Arsenal's players, apart from Aubameyang and Lacazette. And Ozil summed up his performances at Arsenal for a couple of years. He was off the pace, didn't do anything defensively, didn't do anything on the ball, was a liability for Arsenal tonight, and he allowed Jorginho, who I've always been critical of, to run the game at times. Wasn't good enough from Ozil, it wasn't good enough from most of the Arsenal team in that second half.
Arsenal then fall by 3. We'll discuss Chelsea in just a little bit, but a reminder, Extra Time available right now on our YouTube channel. 320,000 subscribers. Are you one of them? You should be. We've got 24/7 transfer updates all summer over on our website, espnfc.com.